Welcome to another edition of the All-NBA Show presented to you by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Tim Legler here, or this guy right here. I should point the right direction this time. I'm Saul Bookman. Thanks for joining us today, Tim. There's a lot of stuff going on. How have you been? It's been a while.
Good, man. Good to see you, Saul. I'm real good, man. I like this time of year. We start dwindling down the teams, right? Sending some people home and narrowing the focus on who's going to be left standing in what I call the NBA's version of the Final Four. We got one team in. Boston punched their ticket last night.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think last night I got a little bit more excited because hey, listen, I don't really care who wins the OKC Dallas series, but what I do hope for is great matchups. And so I've personally been kind of rooting for Dallas to make it against Denver in the Western Conference Finals. I get really excited thinking about that matchup. Last night, Dallas took care of business, beating the OKC Thunder. They looked really good last night. I felt like they were really impressive from top to bottom. They just beat you in so many different ways, and their athleticism is really starting to shine at a different level right now.
Yeah, for me, I couple things when talk about like who you're pulling for, like, just emotional investment in or whatever. Obviously, I'm covering the whole league. I really don't have a team that I lose sleep over if they lose, because I just don't have an NBA team that I'm kind of like connected to in that way. So what I instead root for is same thing as you. What would be the most compelling matchup to me? And also I want to be right in my predictions. That's a big part of it, Paul, right? You want to be right. So right now, after the Celtics got through last night, I'm 9 for 9. I've picked all 9 series. Now, if Dallas gets through, I'll be 10 for 10. If the Nuggets get through, that's 11 for 11. I don't feel as good about – I picked the Pacers. I'm sorry, I picked the Knicks to win that series of 7 games. I'm not sure if that's going to go 7 games or not. And that's a hard one for me to predict. Dallas, Denver, from the time Dallas made the acquisitions in February – I thought this could end up being the conference finals as long as Dallas avoided Denver in the early rounds, which we didn't know that literally until the last couple of days of the season, how that was going to play out because they were all so packed together. As it turns out, Dallas did avoid Denver. Wasn't as fortunate for the Lakers. They ran into the Lakers. They ran into the Nuggets. They go home immediately. Dallas probably would have too, especially if they met them right off the bat in the first round. But as it turns out, they avoided them. And now I'm not saying Oklahoma City can't come back and win this series because they're a number 1 seed for a reason. But that game last night felt like the one Dallas had to have to put themselves in position to go home in a game 6 and close it out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The thing about this matchup so far to me has been everything looks a little easier for Dallas than it does for OKC. It feels like OKC is really grinding to try and score. Now, credit to Dallas's defense, but listen, Dallas is making OKC take advantage of things that they're not really comfortable taking advantage of, and you got to respect that if you're Dallas. Plus, it feels like if they're not hitting threes, they're throwing lobs left and right. Last night, it was like 8, 9, 10 lobs to a variety of different players: Gafford, Lively, Jones. Like it was really great display. But then you always forget, or you don't always forget, but you always are reminded that Luka is that guy. And his performance last night was fantastic. Watching what Jokic did the other night, again, you're talking about 2 teams that potentially can meet up in the Western Conference Finals, that have 2 tremendous all-around players that can score at a high clip, that can facilitate like nobody's business. And then you have superstars that surround them as well that can score at a high clip. Like, the matchup to me is just phenomenal. I don't know what to think about OKC right now. I don't know. Listen, they surprised me in Game 4 by coming back the way they did. I didn't think that was going to be possible because it looked like Dallas had somewhat of a firm hold in that game until about midway through that third quarter, and things started to kind of unravel. I don't know. I'm not going to underestimate them, like you said. I'm thinking, though, Dallas is probably going to take care of business in Game 6.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you would think so. But you're going to let that opportunity slip through your hands twice. They already stole one on the road. They go home. They go up 2-1. You got Game 4 at home, the Mavericks, and they lose that game. And you're thinking, man, like, what's all the work for? You give it right back the next game, and now you go into Game 5 on the road. You're thinking, like, this is the one. And this happened to them in the first round. They got the exact same scenario against the Clippers. They steal one, they go home, they win Game 3, they go up 2-1, and then they drop Game 4 at home to really take control of the series. So that means you go on the road and you have to win a Game 5 in a 2-2 situation. And that's exactly what they did against the Clippers. And they did it, Saul, for the same reason in both games. Because Luka Doncic is the best player in the series. And when Luka Doncic plays the way he did in Game 5 against the Clippers, when he plays the way he did last night, he has the answer for everything. But unfortunately for Dallas, that hasn't been the case every night in the postseason. He's been up and down. Health has played a big part in it. Lou Dort has played a big part in it. He has not been shooting the ball consistently from the perimeter, and as a result, you can guard him differently. Last night he was a big enough threat from the perimeter that he was able to set up some of his drives and some of the stuff he got going to the rim for three-point plays. It sets up his ability to then throw lob passes when he's scoring early and he comes off that ball screen and he likes to get all tight on that and get the guy guarding him on his back, kind of hesitate and then come down the lane. Well, when he's scoring the ball early in the game, that backline defender, whoever that may be, in this case it's Chet Holmgren, you have no choice but to react to Luka as he's coming down the lane. You have to react. So when you react, he waits for the perfect time and throws that thing right behind you. Derek Jones, Lively, Gafford, whoever it may be. But it's all set up by does he look right at the beginning of the game? Is he scoring early to put enough thought in your head defensively that you're going to have to react to him? And that sets up all of his passing. He's the best. He might be the most dominant offensive player in the NBA. And the numbers back it up. When you look at the year that he had and the offense created, it's one of the greatest individual seasons we've seen in this league ever with what he scored and created this year. So there's not really an answer for Luka. You have to hope he misses. You have to hope he relies too much on his jump shot. You have to hope maybe he's banged up a little bit and you have a chance. But when he's able to funnel whatever it is physically he's feeling and he's able to channel that into this laser focus, gotta have this game and I need to be the guy that controls everything. It's incredible how often he's been able to do that in the playoffs. He's already done it twice in this postseason. So now they're up 3-2, they go home. I just can't imagine they're going to lose another opportunity at home that they have to have the way they did in Game 4. I just don't see that happening. So I think Dallas winning that game on the road last night, their defense was incredible. I think that continues and carries them through a Game 6. I think that's where we're headed. Obviously, I am not dismissing Oklahoma City's chances. I think it's just foolish to get that hot take-ish. Oklahoma City's a really good team with a great offensive player that's capable of doing special things in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But I just look at Luka. I look at the totality of Dallas's defense, the contributions they're getting from some of the role players in shot making, because Kyrie's been pretty quiet, and they still won a game last night. I look at all of that, and I think Dallas is in control now that they've gotten this thing to a closeout in their own building. And that's what last night meant. I thought it was the second most important playoff game we have had to this point, period, with the first being Game 3, Minnesota-Denver. I thought that was because you're talking about going down 3-0 in that one, Saul, and a team that can win a championship going home potentially, not being able to win 4 straight games. That's what was at stake when Denver went into Minneapolis after getting smoked in Game 2. So I thought that was the single biggest game to determine actual outcome of the NBA season. I thought last night had that kind of ramification to it with these two teams, 2 MVP candidates, and who's going to have the right to take on Denver and really challenge them. So give Dallas and Luka a lot of credit for getting that win.
Is it, after 5 games, as a player, after 5 games, what, is this just what it is? Like, you're just going to have to figure out how to grind through this and hope that guys are going to be a little bit off when you're talking about, like, if you're OKC and you're having to face the Mavs and they got Luka and Kyrie playing at the level that they're playing, or is there something that you see, Tim, that you think that they can maybe take advantage of and maybe tweak a little bit to try and throw Dallas a little bit off their game?
I don't know that there's much different you're going to do defensively. They've got to be better offensively. They were 10 for 40 from the 3-point line. You just can't have those kind of nights. If you're going to shoot 25% from the 3, that better be like a situation where you go like 8 for 32 or 7 for 28. You can't take 40 trips up the floor shooting 3-point shots when you shoot like that. Dallas's defense, if you go back and look at their possessions last night, their defense right now is incredibly reactive to penetration. So they are flooding to the ball. And it looks like, it's funny because we're talking about the Dallas Mavericks here. And throughout the season, there's always these teams that Minnesota being an example this year as like the gold standard for defense in the NBA. Boston can do this throughout the year, where Oklahoma City as well, where you can put together these films like, wow, look at this. You get help on penetration. Then you get guys dropping down and sinking to protect the drop-off pass. And then there's a pass. Then there's a hard closeout, chasing guys off the three-point line. And then you funnel them back into more help on penetration. And then finally, there's a deep shot with a guy flying at you with a hand up, and you secure the defensive rebound. It's like textbook. This is what a defensive clinic looks like, a drill you would teach teams. And now we're talking about the Mavericks doing that. But as a result, Saul, of all of this activity toward the ball, when any sort of penetration takes place, there are opportunities at the three-point line. There are opportunities out there. Guys are going to have to shoot better than they shot last night in order to have a chance, because this is what Dallas is banking on. We are not going to let you beat us up at the foul line or getting into the paint or getting into your mid-range game. With too much activity in there, you have all the kick-out threes you want. How many can you make with this kind of pressure on you? And that, to me, is what this entire thing's going to come down to the next two games.
Yeah, it feels like everybody before the playoffs started talked about like, the experienced teams wanting to face a team like OKC or Minnesota because of their lack of experience at a high level in the playoffs. I think for the first time you're starting to see OKC's, the moment getting a little big and a little tight. And then in that arena, you could feel it too, because it felt like even when they were down by double digits, every basket, the crowd was like imploring them to keep it going. They were excited even when they're down 15, they score a bucket. They're on their feet cheering because they know the moment is starting to get away from them. I do wonder if the lack of playoff experience is starting to affect them to any degree. Do you feel any way remotely close to that?
I don't. Yeah, yes, it's a factor. You can't say that it's not, man. This team ascended from a young up and coming team with a guy that last year proved that he's a legitimate star scorer in this league, up and coming to number one seed in the West in 1 year, like no evolution there. Like you haven't gone through a couple of early round playoff exits and you add people. And then now, here we go. Now you have a team that you expect to compete for the number one seed. No, a lot of things happened for them to help them become the number one seed, but they did do it. But now you're talking about collectively as a group going through these series against this level of talent and coaching, when you're going to get in a series, the best somebody has because of their adjustments to you, because of the fact that Dallas, I think because of the Kyrie factor, which by the way, hasn't really been needed in the last two games, which is crazy. Kyrie Irving has 23 points total in the last two games. You've barely noticed him offensively, which I think sort of sets up game 6, right? At some point, Kyrie Irving is going to get real splashy. And I think game 6 would be a perfect spot for that. But they've got two guys on that level. Oklahoma City has one. Jalen Williams is a really nice co-star. He's emerging. Jalen Williams is not Kyrie Irving in terms of threat. Because even when Kyrie Irving's not scoring, man, the threat that he is and what he is doing and the amount the defenses have to shift create stuff for other people. And of course, you got Luka, who is every bit the scorer that Shea is, but he's also a guy that dominates you with his passing, playmaking, decision-making, controlling the game. And now you go and plug in all these other pieces around him. More guys that are so comfortable in their lane. You don't have to ask anything extra of Derek Jones, PJ Washington, stand in the corner, knock down threes, and defend. Lively Gafford, screen and run to the rim for 48 minutes. Can you do that? You're going to get rewarded. Derek Jones, same thing. Run in transition. Get some, and every now and then, if you can knock down a catch and shoot three when it's wide open, that's great. But we're not counting on you to do that to win. We're not counting on guys to step out of their lane to win. Just let Kyrie and Luka set the table. Everybody else stay in their lane, and we're going to be just fine because our defense is championship level. For Oklahoma City, It's not like that. You're asking more of guys. You're asking more of the Josh Giddeys of the world, Jalen Williams of the world. You're asking guys like that, young players, to carry more of the burden and go do special things in a playoff series against an elite level defense. That's why I think having two of those guys on one team is a big difference as opposed to one. And that ultimately is, I think, going to be the difference. I think Oklahoma City's inability to really look like they did in a regular season offensively because of this defense is a huge factor. They scored 92 points last night. That's 28 points below their season average. It's hard to overcome that. They played defense good enough to win the game. Their offense wasn't close to that. And it's because of Dallas's defense. I credit it and some of the limitations of Oklahoma City's roster around Shea that they're going to have to address in the offseason. So this could be a year in which, hey, they make it to the second round, they lose, and then you go figure out what do you need to add to really contend next year with not just Dallas, Minnesota, Denver, whatever the Clippers do, the Lakers, who knows? They end up with Donovan Mitchell. They're in the mix now. So you got to figure out who you are. You can only do that by going through some painful losses. And this series isn't over, but I'm just saying based on how I think it's going to go and what happened last night, I think Oklahoma City, if they lose this series, they're going to learn more about themselves. And I think it's actually going to ultimately probably help them address some of their weaknesses.
No, I totally agree. Then in addition to just the maturity of these players, I mean, sometimes we always forget that like a guy like Jalen Williams has never played in the playoffs in the second round. Chet Holmgren, for crying out loud, didn't even play last year. So having those guys get another year of experience, you could see the potential for future. But again, Tim, like the one thing that I always caution people against is the NBA is ever moving. It's ever changing. So you can't always rely on the growth of your players year after year to think that you're going to be right back here next year and you just got to improve from this round and move forward. Like there's constant change that has to happen to that roster as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Listen, Sam Presti has like 9,000 draft picks. I'm sure he's going to find a way to get this all done. But you can get it all done by our good friends over at Manscaped. Listen, they have all the different shavers you could possibly imagine. They got some great, clips, attachments that can get you as smooth as you like. They can also, clean up a little bit of that stubble and just make it, a nice little groom session there for you. You can get yourself some Manscaped by getting 20% off at Manscaped by free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. This summer is here to stay, so trust Manscaped. And listen, man, the pesky hair, they got lotions, they got all this other type of stuff to make sure that you are well groomed all over your body, and you'll be good to go. So you're going to want to make sure you go to manscaped.com. Again, save 20% by going and using promo code ALLNBA to save yourself 20% at manscaped.com. And in addition to that, obviously, DraftKings is where it's at. DraftKings is the best in the game when it comes to sports betting online. You can get yourself, listen, this whole show is sponsored by DraftKings, the All NBA show, sponsored by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you will hear more. And this is brought to you by DraftKings. The one thing about DraftKings that you can make sure that you can take advantage of is by downloading the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and using code ALLNBA. That's code ALLNBA for new customers. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. To me, tonight, the bet is fairly simple. You're going to go ahead and take the Nuggets against the Timberwolves to close out that series, in my opinion. Take the money line. Keep it simple for yourself, but don't listen to me. You can listen to this disclaimer.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
Well, it's kind of funny that we're about to talk about the Celtics because I stumbled through that ad read like the Celtics have stumbled through the playoffs. I've done this a million times. I know exactly what I'm doing, but every now and then I kind of hit a glitch, and that's exactly what the Celtics keep doing. I don't really understand the Celtics. I don't understand why sometimes they fumble around. They play with their food. Last night was another example of that to a certain degree. They were in control the whole game. Don't get me wrong, but again, fourth quarter, 3 major players missing off of the Cavaliers roster, including Donovan Mitchell, and you still were only up by 3 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. A little bit problematic. The conundrum of the Celtics, I don't really understand why they can't just blitzkrieg through these teams, because they're clearly the better team. They should be far superior in every facet of the game, but they just have these lulls and these moments that really give you a little pause for concern, Tim.
Yeah, they're such a fascinating team to gauge and to analyze and break down because of the lack of danger they've been in. And that's when you start to really find out about teams. But to your point, when you look at the Celtics, you say to yourself things like, man, oh man, like, should I judge them based on the fact that they dropped game 2 at home to Miami and Cleveland? Or wait, should I judge them on the fact that their game 3 response on the road was to smoke both of those teams and squash, as I put it, squash the rebellion? Like, maybe that's how I should. Or like last night, do I judge them by the fact that they didn't have Donovan Mitchell and they couldn't put this team away and it was a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter? Or do I judge them by the fact that they then went on to win the game by 15 and the way that they choked them out at the end of the game, right? The way they suffocated them defensively, and then they made shots. Like, that's what the Celtics have been for me. Where we know like who they are at their best and what they were at their best in the regular season, and this is with Kristaps Porzingis, which is a big component. They were the best team in the NBA. We all watched it every night. They had 5 players that played both ends of the floor at a high level. They had 5 different guys that you could initiate offense through. They had 5 different guys that defensively had an impact, including, perimeter players like Holiday and White's the best defensive backcourt in the NBA. And then you have this tandem of wings and Tatum and Brown guard anybody, and they're going to funnel them all back to one of the best rim protectors of his generation in Kristaps Porzingis. That's what they look like defensively. On the other end of the floor, you got all these different guys you can run your offense to. They want to play iso ball. They can win that matchup. They got a guy now, a 7'3" guy that can pop out and shoot 30-footers off pick and pops that you can't get to. And then you got Derek White, this X factor that just has his imprint on every big moment they have all year. So you know what they are at their best. And then they'll have these stretches of games or in this regular season, string together a couple games where you're like, man, something is missing. They're not doing everything they can to force you to be your best defensively to guard them. I think they help you guard them. They took 43 threes last night. 43 threes against a team missing Jared Allen. That's too many threes against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah.
And look, they shot a good percentage. They made 19. It's 44%. It's a big part of who they are. I get all of that. I don't know that the Celtics should be taking 43 threes and 37 twos. I just don't know that that's a formula ultimately that you want to ride all the way to the finish line, which is what their expectation should be, to host a parade, to hoist a trophy. I don't hear all this noise. I'm hearing all kinds of talk now like, well, it's not a failure if they don't win a championship. What are you talking about? They didn't they didn't get you Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis and add to a team that it seems like it's a perennial conference finalist. They don't add those 2 guys to think to themselves, hey, at least now we can lose in 6 to the Nuggets. It'll be a competitive series. No, it's not what you add those guys for. You add them because it's championship. It doesn't mean that it's going to stay a failure, because at the end of the day, as long as they win one together, this group, at some point next year, I understand, then we can, okay, it worked. But in the given year, it is. Their expectation should be to win a championship. Now, I might pick Denver if they play them in the finals, but my opinion is different than what their opinion should be. Their opinion should be title this year. And to do that, you got to max out in the big moments how you play and play to your strengths. And I think sometimes, Saul, they allow you to be better defensively than maybe you should be if they have more ball movement, player movement, more intent on getting into the paint off penetration. See them like that sometimes, and they're unstoppable offensively. Other nights, they help you guard them. And that's why they're always such a conundrum for me in trying to figure out exactly who they are. And certainly this hasn't helped these 2 series. I mean, they're missing a guy that's a 20-point scorer. That's their top rim protector. They didn't have him at all, and they're 8-2 in the playoffs. I don't know yet how the Celtics match up with somebody that can really threaten them. And they'll get tested certainly more extensively in the next round, whether it's Pacers or Knicks. Both of those teams are going to test them. And I think both of those teams will win at least 2 games in that series. But really in danger where we think they might lose the series, I don't know, man. Dallas has been in that boat this year. Denver's been in that boat this year. right? Obviously, who comes out of the Knicks-Pacers has been in that boat this year where you're like, they were in danger of losing. And now, okay, wow, this is interesting. They fought back. They bounced back. Like, look at them now. They're in control of the series. Boston hasn't been in that boat, Saul. And until they are, till that water, dip their toe in that water and it's really hot, not just a weird night where they get beat by an inferior team. I'm talking about we're like, wow, this is an interesting thing here. These matchups look good for the other team. Until we see that and how Boston responds, I think they're a very difficult team to grade.
Yeah, as you were speaking, Evan Mobley slipped the screen and got another wide open dunk. Just so you know, one of the things I saw last night that was just too frequent for my taste. Again, like as you pointed out, the Celtics have been. You see the talent. That team is oozing with talent. That's clear. But they have these clunkers that definitely give you pause for concern. And I can see why you would pick somebody like the Denver Nuggets in a series like that, because Denver, to me, is more cohesive. They're a little bit more connected, and they don't have these fall offs to this degree sporadically, right? Denver got caught. They got punched in the mouth for 2 straight games against the Timberwolves. Like, give the Timberwolves credit for that. But the Timberwolves played at a high level, and the Timberwolves have the ability to beat the Denver Nuggets. And then the Denver Nuggets obviously responded 3 straight games. It's a little bit different than just not showing up to a game and getting your, for pardon my language, your ass handed to you at home twice by 2 teams that are far inferior to what you have to offer. So I do hesitate to think that the Celtics are the foregone conclusion to win the NBA championship. I do, however, it's funny to think about the Knicks and the Pacers. I think you even said this morning on ESPN about how if the Pacers and the Celtics match up in this next round, oh my gosh, we might set all-time scoring records in the NBA, especially from the 3-point line, because both teams just love to run and gun. And so I'm interested to see how the Celtics respond to a team that might have, they can match their firepower. They might not be as consistent, but they can match it from time to time for sure. Obviously, the Celtics will still be the favorite, but there's just so much variability with the Celtics. And I don't feel like, I was just talking about the Mavericks and how they've kind of started to figure out how they can score at different levels and different styles and different ways to really take advantage of your defensive weaknesses. The Celtics have that same ability, but they haven't quite figured it out because they fall in love with the 3 so much, and they don't really find those nice lanes and that comfortability with all their players in order to really take advantage of everybody's skill set at its peak. And I think that's what the Celtics are trying to figure out as they go along. And they're already a 60-plus win team in the regular season, so it's kind of scary to think if they do ever get connected to that degree and they don't have any mishaps, what they could do to this league.
Yeah, look, and I think it's a great points. And I think that these people that I sense in the conversations I've been having here for the last week or so, I'm sensing people, because of what Denver has done to turn that series around and the way Jokic has dominated that series. And now all of a sudden it's like, wow, who's beating that team the way they're playing right now, and the way Jokic is playing? Because of that, all of a sudden now it's like people are like, well, it's not the end of the world if Boston doesn't win. There's a better team in the Western Conference. And I'm just laughing at it because I'm going, what are you talking about? They added these guys, and so then what happens if they lose to Denver? They go out and they sign every former 6th man of the year to come off their bench. They go get Naz Reid. They get like anybody who's won an award, they bring in. Like, now we're 10 deep. Everybody's won an award in our roster, in our rotation. And people would still say, yeah, but did you see Jokic last night? It's like, no, man. You brought these guys in to win a championship. Do you realize that Jaylen Brown has been in the NBA for 8 seasons? This is his 6th conference final. Jayson Tatum, 7 years in the league, 5th conference final. Like, these guys are knocking on the door constantly. They lose to the finals to the Warriors a couple years ago. And so that was the closest they got. They finally broke through, got there. They lose that series. So what happens? They still have these 2 all-star forwards. Jaylen Brown's actually now, it's 1 and 1A between he and Tatum on a nightly basis is murky, because Brown, a lot of nights, looks like their dominant offensive player next to Jayson Tatum. That's where he's risen. You add all these other guys in the last 2 years, White, Porzingis, Holiday, their bench is solid. And now it's like, well, yeah, I don't know if it's really a failure. Yes, it's a failed season. You don't bring these guys in unless you – now, look, they've got one out, Saul. They've got one out. And that is if Kristaps Porzingis doesn't make it back, or he makes it back and he's super limited, or he makes it back and then goes out again, because we have no idea. I've heard no time frame of Kristaps Porzingis. No one's talking about it. It's funny because it sounds like a similar injury to what Giannis had. And Doc Rivers was telling us every day in that Indiana series, yeah, he's close. He's real close. And then the series ended, and Giannis goes, actually, I was never close. I wasn't even close to playing. I'll see you guys like in the fall. And you're like, wow. So I don't know when Porzingis has come back or if. But without him, I don't think they can win a championship. With him, I think they've got a great chance to win a championship. Again, assuming he's back and Denver looks the way they look and they get through the next round, I would probably pick Denver, even though they're going on the road in that series. But Boston, to people now that want to take their foot off the gas with this team and like, let's temper our expectations. What are you talking about? They just won 64 games. You know how many teams in history have won 64 games and you didn't expect to win a championship? I mean, it doesn't happen. Teams that yes, exactly. You get to that level of wins in the regular season, I don't care who the other conference has. You're expecting a title. So that's where the pressure needs to be. Keep exerting it on them. Again, Porzingis is the one caveat. It's a big one. It's a huge loss if he doesn't make it back. That's their one out. If short of that, then it would be a disappointment if they don't get this thing done.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would even say it's a disappointment without Porzingis. I don't think that that's a reason to just completely say, well, that they didn't have Kristaps, so that's why they lost. No, this team has been together for a long, long time. Like their core pieces have been there for a while, and Drew Holiday being added should just boost that as well. Porzingis to me should be a luxury. It shouldn't be something that you have to rely on. Does it make it easier for you? Of course it does. But come on, man, you're the Boston Celtics. You've been there. You've done that. Exactly.
I'm going to say one more thing, too, real quick, because you talked a little bit about it, what I had mentioned about Indiana playing Boston potentially, if that would happen. Like, Indiana's got to win 2 games in a row. That's unlikely to happen. Winning Game 7s on the road are rare in this league. Yeah. So even if they win Game 6 Friday, Game 7 in the Garden on Sunday, that's going to be some atmosphere, man. Yeah. But let's just say they did. You're right. That's what I said it would look like. More of an open, free-flowing game, up and down, 2 teams that love to trade haymakers with their scoring and their shooting. And then ultimately Boston is better defensively. So you think that's why they would get through that series. The Knicks, if it's them, I know they're shorthanded. I know they play a ton of minutes, those guys. Here's the difference. The Boston, New York sauce, the spice added to that sauce because of the 2 cities, the 2 fan bases, right? These are considered, even though we don't really have great rivalries in the NBA, it's still a decent one. Anytime a New York team plays a Boston team, there's something extra there in the air. And I was thinking, how would I describe that series? If Indiana-Boston is this up and down, free-flowing, almost like a pickup game, it would feel to it. What would the Knicks be? And you know what scene popped in my head? I'm a big movie guy. I like referencing scenes in movies. Happy Gilmore and Shooter McGavin in the bar when Happy Gilmore breaks the bottle, right, and holds up the jagged ends of the bottle to Shooter McGavin because he wants to fight him in the bar. That's Knicks Celtics. Like, that's what that series would look like. A barroom fight, an alley fight, this relentlessness of the Knicks, offensive rebounding playing a huge factor, particularly if Porzingis is not there for the conference finals. That's a massive problem, keeping all those guys off the glass. And then the most dominant offensive player left in the Eastern Conference is Jalen Brunson. So that to me is the games would be different. I think you'd be looking at 102-96 games. Yeah. A little bit different, I think, than what you would get with Indiana, Boston. Either way, Boston has enough to answer both of those. They've got more guys than any team in the league to put on Jalen Brunson. It'll be way better than what he's seen to this point with Nembhard and whoever he gets in Indiana besides Nembhard, even in the first round, what he got against the Sixers with Kelly Oubre and whoever else, Maxey, whoever else was guarding him. This is different. This is Derek White, Drew Holiday, 2 of the best in the league. This is Tatum and Brown if they switch on to him. So they've got answers for that, and they've got depth that the Knicks don't have right now. So I think the Boston would have the answers necessary, but I think they would finally face some real adversity, not manufactured adversity, because it was 1-1 against the Heat and Cavaliers, and people were wondering, like, oh, what's wrong with the Celtics? And then they just go snuff them out in 3 games straight, both series. That's not what that would look like, and especially not in the finals if you play Denver. Go ahead, lose Game 2 at home in the Denver series, Boston, and see what happens. See what that looks like going on the road. It's different right now. The margin for error is a lot greater in what they've seen so far. But the Knicks and Pacers, they're going to up the ante and up the stakes a little bit for the Celtics to raise their game.
What are you expecting from that game tonight? Then, if obviously, is TJ McConnell going to finally get some like last minute burn to try and do whatever he can against Jalen Brunson, or is he just going to continue to be benched in the waning minutes of these games? I understand Nembhard is a favorite right now. He hit a big shot the other night in Indiana, but come on, man, TJ's getting snuffed, man. I don't like it as a U of A Wildcat. I'm not going to co-sign on that.
Yeah, it's been crazy to watch TJ McConnell. He's had as great an impact as a backup point guard in this series as like just about any you'll find in the playoffs. It's incredible what he's done to them and their inability to contain him. And it's one thing if he's just, going around like being a pest on defense and getting in the lane and finding people. The fact that he's scoring the way that he is, in addition to finding people, it's really incredible. He had 9 assists in a half of basketball in this series, coming off the bench. Like that's almost impossible to accomplish. So here's the question, and this is the last thing. And this game is tomorrow night, Game 6, and it's an interesting scenario because it's a Friday night game. If the Pacers win that game, you're talking about turning around in less than 40 hours and playing Game 7 on a Sunday afternoon. That is a disadvantage for the Knicks because of how few people they play, particularly if this Game 6 goes down to the wire and Josh Hart and Brunson and DiVincenzo are all playing 45 to 48 minutes. And then you got to travel and then turn right back around and play Sunday afternoon. Now, the Garden, adrenaline could get them through it, but that's an interesting scenario. Here's what it comes down to, Saul, for me, and then we'll move on to the game that's going to take place tonight. Tyrese Halliburton. He's had 2 games in this series where he completely was a non-factor offensively. You didn't notice him. 2 games, both in the Garden, Game 1, Game 5. The other 3 games, 2 in Indiana, 1 in the Garden, including Game 2, sensational. Sets the table, playing fast, open floor, throwing the ball ahead, looking for his shot, putting pressure on the Knicks, whoever's guarding him. I don't know what happened in Game 5 the other night. Tyrese Halliburton reverted to Game 1. You barely noticed him offensively. I think he took 9 shots, like 3 of those were in the fourth quarter. He meant nothing. So I don't know what that's about, but he can't play that way with that little aggressiveness. They need him. So I look at Halliburton as the gauge for Game 6. If he comes out and plays with pace and he's putting pressure on them early and he looks like he's really confident, looking for his shot early in the game, I feel really good about the Pacers winning that game and forcing it to the Garden for a Game 7.
Tonight, Nuggets, Timberwolves in Minnesota. Minnesota, do or die. They got to win. Otherwise, it's over for them, and the Nuggets move on to the Western Conference Finals. My gut is telling me that the Nuggets will take care of business tonight. However, there's this guy that's pretty good in Ant that I just feel like he's going to embrace the moment and he's going to play at an incredibly high level like he has already in these playoffs. So I don't say this with 100% certainty, but I do feel like the Nuggets will find a way to pull this out tonight.
Look, I mean, you'd have to kind of suspend reality in what you've seen the last 3 games, I think, to think that Denver won't win the game. You'd have to say, well, this is not sustainable. Why? This is Denver, how they look at their best. And now they've got space. They've gotten Minnesota off of them. The relentless pressure they faced in the first 2 games in Denver, they figured out how to alleviate that. Better screen setting. Murray looks quicker, and different guys are handling the ball, bringing it up to alleviate some of that pressure. And once they get into their sets, this is the best team in the league at executing what they want to run. And then the final thing is just Jokic, what he is doing to any sort of matchup that's in front of him right now. He's obliterating whatever he sees. One-on-one coverage, it's a basket. You want to run late help at him, he drops it off to Aaron Gordon along the baseline who's killing them. You want to run early help at him, it's going to be a cross-court skip pass to somebody for a wide-open shot. There's no real answer for him. I don't know how you change that. If you're Minnesota, here's the one adjustment I think you'll see tonight. After what happened the other night, okay, you can't allow him to operate one-on-one that much in the post against these guys. I don't care who they are. Defensive player of the year, 6th man of the year, or an all-star, Karl Anthony Towns. The guy is just gutting whatever he gets in single coverage. More double teams at him early and late, mix it up, force the KCPs of the world, the Christian Browns of the world, the Justin Holidays of the world, the Aaron Gordons of the world. Take as many threes as you want. We are not letting Jokic and then the Jokic-Murray combination destroy us to this and get us back on our heels to this extent. We're going to be proactive. We're going to try to dictate to you what you're going to be allowed to do rather than just sit back and react to what you're doing to us. We have to dictate terms. How do you do that? The only way that I can see that you affect it is to get the ball out of his hands as much as you can and see if other guys can step up, make shots. And guess what? If they do, Saul, and they make 14, 15 threes, okay, from the guys I mentioned, that collection of players, I got news for you. You aren't good enough to beat this team. And you did something at least to adjust. But if you go status quo with the same mentality defensively, it's going to be the same result as you've seen the last 3 games.
For sure. Listen, that's the show. But before we wrap it up, let's get to Who Won the Week, which is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code ALLNBA to save yourself 20%. All right, Tim, I'm going to give you 3 names, or you can give me one of your own. It's up to you. The first one, I got Nikola Jokic because of the week that he had. Obviously, being named the MVP last week, he's just kind of taken that torch and gone crazy with it. Now they've won 3 straight in a row. The other one I will give you kind of tongue-in-cheek, but because Mike Budenholzer got hired here in Arizona, I figured, hey, if anybody's going to unlock Kevin Durant must have had a hell of a week then. So there's Kevin Durant. And then finally I got Zach Randolph because he was there watching his daughter, McKinley Randolph, play for Team USA against the world the other day, and they won 83-80. And I just thought it was pretty cool to be able to be an all-time NBA great and watch your daughter play at a high level like you did. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I love those candidates. A little bit outside the box thinking. I love that. I'm going with Jokic because I think about since the last show of the week last week on Friday, okay, because Game 3 was Friday night. So since we had that show when everything was up in the air regarding the Denver Nuggets, like my goodness, they just got smoked. Game 3's the night. Like the Minnesota playing at home. What's that crowd going to be like? Wow, they could take control of this thing and send the champs home early. Look where we are now. That's how much has changed in the 3 wins that Denver had, the way Jokic has looked. So I'll go combination Jokic / Nuggets. It's a collective effort. All of those guys, Michael Malone, that's Jamal Murray, throw them all in there. They are the big winners of the week because that is as dramatic a turn of events within a series as I've seen in a long time. What Minnesota looked like in Game 2 and the ineptitude of Denver in that game to where we're at now, 3 straight wins, and they look unstoppable. It's incredible what has happened over the last week, and that's why I'd say I'd got to go with the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. Obviously, the second one was a little tongue-in-cheek, which I think is pretty funny. But we appreciate you all for joining us on another episode of the All NBA podcast. You can follow the show at ALLCITY_NBA. You can follow my guy Legs at Legs ESPN. You can follow me at Saul_Bookman. Until next time, folks. Peace.
City like the mayor.